Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think it's officially noon now, so I can say that, and we will get started. So welcome to the third session of our 5-part Retire Well series. I am Susan Proctor, the Director of Alumni Relations here at GVSU. And so pleased to see so many of folks joining us today and so many returning folks from other sessions in this series. So these webinars are part of a new Alumni Relations Laker for Lifetime learning programming aimed at supporting our graduates through every stage of life and career. Today's session will be focused on investing in income and retirement. If you were unable to join any of our past sessions, you can see them listed here. Or if you have yet to sign up for some of our upcoming sessions, you can find videos and resources from past sessions, as well as an RSVP for upcoming sessions here at the website listed to the right here, gvsu.edu/alumni/retirewell. Some additional programming that you might also find of interest aimed at supporting our Bedrock alumni includes Grand Forum. Grand Forum is a member-based educational program for adults that are 55 and older who are eager to both learn and stay engaged in community and with peers. And you can find more information about Grand Forum and future sessions that we'll be hosting at gvsu.edu/Grand Forum. So super grateful to be able to have the ability to partner with one of our amazing graduates from Grand Valley and alumni board member here at GVSU, Melissa Stewart. For those of you that have joined us, you know how amazing Melissa has been. She is really the brainchild behind this Retire Well series, and we're so grateful to have her sharing her wisdom and expertise with us on a weekly basis. Melissa had been moderating and helping answer questions through the last of our sessions, but since she will be presenting today, I will be moderating questions. And just a little bit about how this Zoom webinar will work. If you do have questions or comments, I think we hope that this will be an interactive experience, and you should be able to see along the bottom of your screen a little Q&A feature there. So if you want to click on that and type any input that you have, I'll be sure to monitor that and can answer or pose those questions on your behalf to Melissa. And so please just interrupt. We want to make sure we get your questions asked. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Melissa. So if you could help me, joining 2009 graduate and founder of and financial advisor at ClearVista Advising, Melissa.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. I appreciate that. So I think you're going to have to add it so that I can share my screen.
I should be able to now. Sorry.
No problem. There we go. Love it when the technology works. Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Susan. So the Retire Well series really came about as I work with several employers helping to consult on their retirement plans. And one human resource director said, you know what, we have a lot of people in our group considering retirement. Can you put on some sort of series to help tee people up to all the decisions that they have to make as they're preparing for retirement? And you know, you've worked your life saving this money, worked hard, putting money away consistently, or your employer has helped to put, substantial money away from you consistently. So with the hope of that you can retire, and you can retire on your terms when you want to retire. And now we have this large chunk of money and we want to make sure we do what we're supposed to with it. Along the way, people said, oh, you should save 10 to 15% of your income over your life. Invest it, keep it well diversified. And honestly, I think the accumulation phase is a little bit easier than the distribution phase as you start making all these decisions. You don't want to mess it up, right? You don't want to mess up this life savings that you have. So that's really what today's session is about. And I have a lot of great content to go through. So I am going to go through the information a bit fast today. But I'm going on, just give you a little bit of background on me. I'm going on almost 20 years in the finance industry. Started out locally here in West Michigan at Lake Michigan Credit Union as a teller, and since then have moved my way over to now founder and owner of ClearVista Advisors. Finished Grand Valley back in 2009. I was a bit of a non-traditional student. I took all nighttime classes at Grand Valley. I had gone to Grand Rapids Community College prior to that. So I went all night classes while I was working during the day, already starting in this industry. I'm a certified financial planner, accredited investment fiduciary. In this industry, we just like to have a lot of initials. I think we're trying to put the alphabet behind our name. Also a certified plan fiduciary advisor, and that's really when I work on retirement plans, helping to consult on them. So work to be active in the community. Been on the Grand Valley Alumni board now for about 4 years. Been helping out Safe Haven Ministries on their finance committee for a couple years. And when I'm not doing all of this, I enjoy running. I ran my first half marathon last year, working out and then spending time with my 10-year-old son and my 12-year-old daughter. So life is never dull. My goal today is to give you some ideas and concepts along how to maximize your retirement savings through your investment strategy, and then also some financial planning topics. Honestly, a lot of the points I'm going to bring up today, it could be a seminar all on its own, from making sure you stay invested in retirement to considering Roth strategies and Roth conversions in retirement. Each one of these could almost be their own strategy. So with our own presentation. So some of this is going to be a little bit quick, but I want you to know that you're welcome to reach out to myself or my team here at ClearVista Advisors, and we're happy to go into these topics in more detail with you after today's presentation. So just supposed to be enough to wet your whistle. So the first thing we're going to start out with today is investment strategy. And boy, has these markets over the last 2 years been a roller coaster, right? We go off of 2021 being a phenomenal year in the market, and 2020 really, only to get a lot of indigestion last year with all the volatility we had in the stock market and the highs and the lows last year. So we're going to talk a little bit about your risk level, an institutional investment process, what diversification means, staying the course during these volatile times, and then you know, we say, well, I have this chunk of money now. What should I do with it, Melissa? And that decision is really going to be up to you, but I'm just going to give you some ideas. So we'll get started with the first part of today, investment strategy. So the first thing you really need to do is help to determine your level of risk, working with your own financial advisor, or hopefully with a financial advisor, or even a lot of the tools out there. I know, you know, Grand Valley is working with Fidelity and TIAA. For its own retirement plan. You might work with your own advisor at Fidelity or Schwab or wherever. But the first thing we really need to do is figure out what level of risk you're comfortable assuming, okay? Because when we have downturns, we need to make sure that we stay invested during those downturns. A really aggressive strategy back in 2008, 2009, that was all in the stock market. And when we think about 2008, 2009, that was our Great Recession, right? It was the financial crisis. We thought the sky was falling. We had Lehman Brothers going bankrupt. We had GMC going under. We had TARP money that the government was giving out to financial institutions. So I use that as an indicator of like, how much risk are you comfortable assuming? And people who were all in the market and very aggressive, they watched their portfolios drop by about 50%. Versus people who were maybe in a more moderately conservative strategy saw their portfolios go down about 15-20%. So working with an advisor, I would say the first step, and then one of the most important steps, is figuring out the level of risk you're comfortable assuming. Because I, as an advisor, when the market goes down and you are like, "Ooh, Melissa, I don't know about this. I think maybe we should get more conservative." We go back to this and we say, well, has anything changed in your financial plan? So first thing is to figure out the level of risk you're comfortable assuming. Also, if you have your accounts being professionally managed, they're using what we call an institutional investment approach. So for the last 20 years, from 1999 to 2018, we've seen institutions, and by that I mean pensions, endowments, large foundations, historically get a higher rate of return than the average investor. And so then I asked myself, well, why is that? Why would institutions be able to consistently outperform when we look at similar portfolios, similar investment strategies? And really what it comes down to is institutions have an investment process that they follow and they stick to even during market downturns, okay? The average investor, we get emotional. In our brain, when we watch the market go down, The same area of our brain lights up when we open up that statement, right? When you open up your last statement and you're like, oh, my account was down 15% last year. That's a lot of money. The same area of our brain lights up as though we were experiencing physical pain. And when we slam our hand on the car door, or we hit it with a hammer, what do? We pull away, right? We want out. And so emotionally, in our emotional brain, this goes back to fight or flight. Our emotional brain reacts, don't quote me on this, but I think it's 3 times faster than our rational brain, right? You think about it and you get cut off by somebody on the highway, and how fast do you go? I mean, I get a little hot, right? Someone cuts me off on the highway, I get a little hot. And I take a deep breath, and then I let my logical brain come into play, my rational brain, and say, hey, they must be having a hard day. Maybe they need to get to the hospital. Maybe their kid's sick. Who knows, right? But emotional versus rational. So institutions have a defined process. One of the first things they're looking at is, what do they think the market's going to do over the next 5 to 10 years? Not just the stock market, but international, US, large companies, small companies, real estate. That's step 1. Step 2 is then to take all of that data and now create strategies. We create an aggressive strategy. We create a moderately aggressive strategy, a conservative strategy. Should that strategy have 5% in real estate or 10% in real estate? Run the analysis, run the analysis, run the analysis. Okay, so there's a lot of analysis going on to figure out, how much should we have invested in these different areas of the market to helpfully optimize your rate of return based on how much risk you're willing to assume. So as you can see with the risk assessment, a risk assessment starts out with, what's your risk tolerance? When are you going to need this money? How long are we going to need this money to last you? And then what are other things that we need to take consideration with your financial plan, right? So step 2 is asset allocation. Step 3, once we know the asset allocation, we have to figure out the investments to use. There's only hundreds of thousands of investments available out there. No big deal. Do we want to use active managers or passive managers? And these are all things that are getting done for you either by your professional advisor or through your own personal financial advisor and helping to figure out. And then step 4 is we're continually monitoring it. Step 1, the assumptions get updated annually. And based on those assumptions, maybe we decide instead of having 10% international, we want to have 8% in international, right? So that goes into step 2. So you can see how this is an ever continuing process. So that if you're using, a target date fund right now inside of your retirement plan or some sort of professionally managed investments, this is usually what's going on behind the scenes. It's a lot of work. You just don't even see it. Then we go on to diversification, which is also important. And so this is really talking about the importance of diversification. On this chart here, we have a lesser diversified investment strategy and then a more diversified investment strategy. Down here, one of the words I look at is volatility, or that's our scale of risk. The higher the volatility, the higher swings in the portfolio we see. The lower volatility, the lower the swings, the lower the risk. Okay, so we wanted portfolios that had the similar rate of volatility, but as you can see here, this is the importance of diversification. By adding in some exposure to some emerging markets, to some US high yield bonds, to some emerging debt, instead of just using what we call these 3 asset classes, like the S&P 500, which would be investing in large US companies, the EFI would be international, and then the Bloomberg Barclays would be your bond or fixed income, which is more conservative, usually in nature. And by just adding some more asset classes, we're able to keep the same level of risk, but we're also able to increase the rate of return. And this is why asset allocation is so important, right? It's not as easy as just saying, oh, I'm going to put half of it in the S&P 500 and half of it in, a fixed income bond fund. We really want to add more diversification. And it can help keep the same level of risk, but increase your rate of return, which is our goal, right? Get you the best rate of return possible for the level of risk you're comfortable assuming. One of the strategies that I often implement with a lot of retirees is called the bucket approach. So with many of my retirees, we'll actually have 3 accounts that we open. And I'll go into a little bit more of what it means to open accounts and what that might look like for you down the road. But we have one account that's meant for long-term, okay? Long-term money. when I got into this industry, I thought if you retire, you should just take your money and put it into cash. You retired. Why would you want any of that to have any risk, right? But some of that money we're not going to use for 10 or 20, maybe even 30 years. We have a long time. We should keep the money invested to help get you a better rate of return so that you have more money to be able to spend in retirement. Okay. So this is just an example for $1 million. This can get adjusted. It's just for simplicity. We used $1 million. Okay. It could be 250,000. It could be 500,000. If you're lucky, it could be 10 million, right? So for someone who has $1 million and maybe they're moderately conservative, so a moderately conservative type investor might have about half of their money in the market, in the stock market, and half of it in fixed income or other cash type investments. Okay, I find a lot of retirees are in the moderately conservative stance as far as how much risk they want to take. We'll put $500,000-ish into their long-term account. By bucket, we mean account. Then we'll open up another account. We'll say, you know what, this is the money we're going to need in the next 5 to 6 years. So we don't want to take as much risk with it. So that will be our midterm account. My long-term account, we're going to usually think the stock market and equities. When I see my long-term account go down by 20% last year, like it did, right? We ended down about 16% last year. I don't have to worry about that as much because I know I'm not going to need that money for 10 or more years. Okay. Then the midterm account, well, that's the money I'm going to need in the next 3 to 5 years. If it goes down, I still have some time for it to recover, but because I need that money sooner, I don't want to take as much risk with it. And then we have our short-term account. This is going to be like your cash, your CDs. Honestly, it's been pretty boring up until this last year, right? Cash, CDs, 0.5%. But now we have 1-year CDs paying out 4%. So we can get a little bit more higher rates of return on this. And your cash account is really money you're going to need in the next 2 to 3 years. And then any emergency savings that you want, your short-term account. Cash or cash substitutes, right? CDs, money markets, things of that nature. What that allows me to do is when the market goes down and I watch my investments to go down, I can look at my short-term account and know I have enough money to get me through for the next 2 to 3 years. And I have time to wait for my investments to recover. Now, we could do this all in one account, okay? Why are we splitting this into 3 accounts when we could just put this all in one account and diversify accordingly? There are studies out there showing that people are more likely to stick to their investment strategy in a down market when we split it up like this than if we just put it all in one account. Because in one account, a strategy like this, you would have seen overall go down about 15%. Okay. But when I split it up and show you that you have $200,000 in safer money ready there for you to pull from, and then your stock account, your stock or equities account is in this long-term bucket, and we have plenty of time for that to recover, you're more likely to stick to your investment strategy. Susan, do we have any questions coming in? All right, I don't think so. Great. So that's how that works. We just explained that. So when it comes to investment strategy, I'm going to remind you, I sound like a broken record this last 12 months, to stay the course. What we're showing here is going back to 2000. The blue line is what the S&P 500 index. So the S&P 500 index is the 500 largest companies in the US. We put them all into one basket, one type of investment. We call it an index, and we judge how their performance was when we look at all 500 companies combined together. And so in many cases, when I say this is what the market did, I'm referring to the S&P 500 because it's just a good benchmark for what did the stock market, what is it doing? The blue line is where it ended at the end of the year. The green dot was its worst performance from top to bottom at some point in time during the year. So back in 2020, when the stock market, the S&P 500, ended the year up 18.4%, at some point in time from the top to the bottom it had been that year, it dropped 33.8%. So if you had sold out of your portfolio and it was on the S&P 500, when it was down 33.7%, 8%, you would have never seen the positive returns by year end. You know what I'm saying here? Gotta stay the course. This is another chart I've been using this past year a lot, and it's talking about how the markets rebound over time. So the bigger the blue bubble, the bigger the downturn we had in the market. So when we go back to 2008, 2009, the global financial crisis, the S&P 500 from top to bottom dropped 56%. Okay. It took us 1,022 days from when the market hit the bottom for it to fully recover, but it did fully recover. Okay. Another downturn that we had, and I think we're experiencing something a little bit more similar to like we did back in the 1980s. So if you think about 1980s, if you were getting your mortgage back then, you were having a 14, 15, I've even heard horror stories of 18% mortgage. Okay. Luckily, interest rates aren't there right now, but we do have high inflation. We have a downturn going on right now. Historically speaking, recessions happen about every 8 to 10 years. So if we consider the global financial crisis happening, that really being our last big recession that we've had, we've been due for a recession. As an advisor, I don't really get scared when I hear that R word, recession, because I know it happens about every 8 to 10 years. Okay. In fact, for younger people who are looking to take advantage of downturns in the market, I say, this only happens 3 or 4 times in your investing career. For my retirees who are getting nervous, I say, you know what? We had you properly positioned before this happened, so let's stay the course. Was there a question there?
Yes. So the question, I think, is about your buckets.
Yeah.
And Pat was wondering if you recommend having a money market account in the cash bucket.
Yeah. So, prior, when interest rates were so low before last year, we would keep the cash bucket a little bit lower because we couldn't, money markets are paying out like 0.2, 0.4, maybe 0.5% if you were lucky. But now I'm seeing money markets pay out a little bit higher interest rates. So yes, it can count as part of your cash bucket. I'm not like giving recommendations for any investment products today, but CDs are paying, higher interest rates right now. So that would be something too you could consider as part of your cash bucket. So cash, money market, CDs, things that you can have easier access to. They're fairly liquid. And you know that they're going to be more stable. They're less likely to, they're not really going to be, last year we saw fixed income go down 15%. So this is going to be stable. It's going to be boring, probably a low interest rate, but hey, at least you have access to it.
Great, thank you.
Good question. All right, so back in 1987, it took 398 days for the market to fully recover once it hit its bottom, the S&P 500. So just over a year. But we recommend staying the course, usually. Depends on, your specific situation. But downturns have historically been short-lived, with the S&P 500 seeing in 12 months gains in most cases. So going back to that Black Monday, October 19th, 1987 was the market hit its low. Within 6 months of it hitting its low, it had increased. It had gone back up 14.7%. And within 12 months of it hitting its bottom, it had recovered 23.19%. Okay, so significantly, this is where if you think you can get out of the market, you know what, Melissa? It's just too much risk for me. I don't want to see my account lose another dime. This is where I encourage you to stay in, because by the time we get back in, we think we can time it. I'm just going to get out for a little while. We're probably going to go into recession sometime here soon. So I'm just going to get out for a little while. I'll get back in when I feel better about things. I'll reinvest my money when I feel better about things. And this is where we see typically by the time we feel better about things, the market has usually fully recovered. And that goes back to that first slide as to why institutions usually do better than individual investors, because institutions stay the course. Okay. What if from January 2002 to December 31st, 2021, you had stayed fully invested? So this is the $10,000 during that time frame. If you think about it, we saw 2008, 2009 happen during then, right? We had the great financial crisis, the Great Recession. If you had stayed fully invested during that time frame, you would have seen your account grow about 9.5%. Your $10,000 investment would have been worth $61,000. But if you missed the best 10 days of the stock market during that time frame, your $10,000 investment would have only been worth $28,000. You see the theme here? If you missed the 20 best days of the stock market during that time frame, you would have only gotten a rate return of 2.6%. And if we missed some of, the best 40 days of the market, you would have had negative returns. And we don't know when those best days are going to happen, just like I don't know when the worst days were going to happen. If I did, I would make a lot more money if I could predict that. Unfortunately, my crystal ball is broken. I do know it comes back. It goes up over the long run. That's what I do know. So when you retire, you're going to be thinking about, okay, I have this, most of us when we retire, we either have an individual retirement account known as an IRA. We might have a Roth IRA. We'll talk about those here in a minute. Or a lot of us, most of us, have our money in our 403B. Usually if you work for a nonprofit, it's called a 403B, or a 401k if you work for a for-profit, right? And you can decide to leave that money in your 403B or 401k and keep it there. And you can work with that institution to start taking distributions out of your account. Okay, so you can leave it there, keep it invested, keep it growing. Or you might decide that you want to take that money from your 401k or 403B and roll it over to what's called an IRA, an individual retirement account. Nice thing about an IRA is you get to choose the financial advisor that you're going to work with on that. Okay, so it's easier to implement the bucket strategy, right? Because I can open up multiple IRAs. We could open up multiple accounts and do that bucket strategy investing. Also, you have access to other investment options. If you leave it inside your employer's 401k or 403b, you only have access to the usually on average about 20 investments that are available in there, right? Outside of your 401k or 403b, we have access to a lot more investments. Further diversification, we have investments, some alternative investments that you have access to, especially if you have a higher net worth. We can get, more fancy, I guess, with the investments. So that's something to consider. Other services offered, financial planning. Now, I will say you can hire a financial planner and they charge a fee and they will put together a financial plan for you. And even in some cases, they'll help you implement that financial plan. So, you want someone to review your investment strategy, you want to just pay a one-time fee, you can hire a financial planner to do that. It's usually a one-time fee. And then, it could be an ongoing fee each time you engage with them. But I want to let you know that that's an option too.
Melissa, we have someone raising their hands here.
Yep.
So Coleman, looks like I can take you off mute if you want to ask that question live here, or you can type that into the Q&A function as well.
No.
Off mute here.
Hi, Coleman. You had a question for us? There we go.
Yeah, I was wondering, are you going to talk about RMDs at all?
I am. That's my tips and tricks at the end.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all. That's the only question.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Good question. Okay. So cons, potentially higher cost. When you have your money in an employer's retirement plan, usually there's potentially millions of dollars in there. So they get discounts. Okay. So in an employer retirement plan, you're paying for your investment expense, whatever investments you choose. You're paying for the record keeper, which would be like the TIAA, Fidelity, Vanguard of the world. And then you're paying a smaller fee, usually for the consultant that's just advising on the plan as a whole. So your fees are typically lower if you keep your money in your employer's retirement plan. However, there are studies out there. Morningstar has a study and Vanguard both have a study. Vanguard's study is called Advisor Alpha, and they say that an advisor usually adds about 3% more when working with those in retirement. So I would dare say that an advisor can more than make up their fees. But I'm an advisor, so I'm probably a little biased, right? But it's something to consider. If you take your money out of your employer's retirement plan, you can't move it back in there unless you're working for them. Okay, then you can roll it back in. But if you're retired and you take it out, you can't put it back in there. IRAs, you can start taking distributions from them typically when you're 59 and a half without paying any penalties. You still will probably have to pay taxes if it's in an IRA. It's tax-free if it's in a Roth IRA. But in a 403B plan, if you're 55 and you're retired, you can start doing withdrawals then and no 10% penalty. And that's just inside a 403B plan. So if you're retiring before age 59 and a half, and you're going to need access to some money, you might want to leave it in the 403B plan just so that you can get some withdrawals out and not have to pay a penalty. The next big question I say is, okay, how much can I withdraw? We don't want to outlive our money. You have Social Security, which is going to be next week's topic. But for most of us, Social Security only provides about 40%. That's the national average. Social Security provides about 40% of the money that people need. You're in charge of making up the other 60% with your retirement savings. So how much can I withdraw? There's a rule of thumb in there in our advisory world called 4%. So if I had $1 million, I could take out 4% of that, so $40,000 a year, and not outlive my money. But we're seeing that can be really situational. So if you had $1 million when you're retired and you start taking out 4% a year, and we give it a 2% inflationary increase each year, that money should last you about 30 years. There's an 80% probability that money will last you for 30 years. If you took out 5% of the account each year, it will last you about 20-25 years. And if you're withdrawing 6% of that account a year, it will last you about 15 to 20 years. So we say just 4%, but is that the case? Is our withdrawals static in retirement? Typically, we see our withdrawals are not static in retirement. When I first retired, we're in go mode, and this one we call it the active phase. It's the go mode, right? I would love to be able to have at least 100% of what I was used to spending when I first retire. Okay. Then we get a little bit older and we're missing the age bracket down here, about age 80 or so. I will fix that later, but before we send out this presentation, we'll get it fixed for you. But about age 80-ish, we might start slowing down a little bit. Maybe we don't do as much travel. I'm sure you won't start slowing down at all, especially you, Susan. Okay, you're a go-getter. But most of us, we might just, we don't travel as much. We stay back. We hang with the grandkids. So we call that the slow go phase. And during the slow go phase, we don't need as much money. We're not doing as many things. Okay, maybe you go down to one vehicle instead of needing 2 vehicles. Okay, so we actually see a 20 to 30% reduction in spending. And then that final age, I'm going to say somewhere between age 85 and 90, we actually see expenses go back up again because of healthcare and long-term care that you might be needing at that point in time in life. So can you see how the 4% withdrawal rule wouldn't really work out if this was just like a static line, right? We want to plan. I want to be able to spend more at the beginning of my retirement. I want to be able to go travel. I want, maybe to get that RV. I want to be able to help my grandkids with some of their college education. And so we want to be able to, spend more at the beginning. So another factor when we think about how much can I withdraw, there's this thing out there called the sequence of returns. And this was pretty eye-opening to me when I first learned it. So we have 2 situations here. Well, 3 actually. We have a 5% average rate of return. So, what if every single year I get a 5% rate of return? And then we have somebody who has great rates of return. We call this the good start, bad end situation. So at the beginning of this time frame, they have great rates of return in their investment portfolio. Then average, and then towards the end of their investment time frame, the market drops. Okay, and they get bad rates of return towards the end. Or you have the other side. What about somebody who had a bad start? A 20-year-old, for example, who's just starting to save in their retirement savings. They have a bad start to their situation, but then towards the end of their savings time period, so this could be for somebody who's almost turning 65, they have great rates of return. Okay, so we have 2 different return patterns going on here. Well, if we're just investing a lump sum, it doesn't really matter. If I'm just investing $100,000 and I did it 30 years ago, whether I had a good start or a bad start, it doesn't matter. I still get to the same ending point. I'm not saving along the way. I just put $100,000 in and let it grow. That 5% return looks the same. Now let's talk about somebody who's in their saving years. Somebody who's in their saving years and they're saving $10,000 a year annually, and they start 30 years ago. All right, so for the person who starts out with a great rate of return, so this is your 20-year-old, and they start with some great rate of return. But the thing is they don't have very much money saved yet, right? They got $10, $20, $30,000 saved. So compounding is not really working to their advantage as much. So they end their saving time period 30 years later with about $485,000. Okay. The average person, if they had gotten 5% every single year, and it was static, it stayed the same, they would have $664,000. The person who had the bad start happened when they were first starting to save. They didn't have very much money saved. And the good years happened when they had a lot of money saved right before they were going to retire. So the person who had a bad start and a great end to their performance rate of returns, they have significantly more money. Okay. All right, so that's during your saving, and that's how it can affect it during your saving years, your accumulation years. But how about your distribution years? When we look at distribution years, this is for a person who had $1 million saved, and this is, let's say they're going to live 65 to 95, okay, because we're going 30 years, okay? Well, we can see here if they had the bad start here in retirement. Well, we'll start the other way. I'm sorry, I'm going to start with the blue line. They had a great start. They had great rates of return. They were taking money out along the way. Okay, we go with the 4% withdrawal rule. We give a 2% inflationary increase for this person. We see that at the end of their lives, at the end of their 30 years, because they had a great start and then they had the bad performance towards the end of their life, they still have $1.7 million left. And the reason is they're taking distributions along the way. So when we look at the person who just got the stable 5% rate of return, they would have had in that 30-year time period about $800,000 left. But for the person who was unfortunate and they had a bad start, this is your person who you heard say in 2008, 2009, my account just dropped by 50% and I can't afford to retire anymore. Okay, I'm going to have to work longer. This person, because now they had the bad start, and when the bad start happened, the first year they watched their accounts drop by 20%. Now they're withdrawing money from their strategy, and because they're withdrawing money, there's not as much their money to recover when the market does come back, and so they have a completely different situation where their money actually lasts them for 7 years less. They don't have any money at the end of about 20, we'll say 24 years is when their $1 million is gone. Okay. So that's what we're looking for to like not, have happen in your situation. I never really understood the sequence of returns. I just thought a 5% rate of return was a 5% rate of return, right? But now we see there's a little bit of a difference here. So how do we plan for all of this? This is where financial planning comes into place. We use a goals-based financial planning. What are your goals? Oh, Melissa, I would like to start taking vacations. When we retire at 65 or 67, we really haven't traveled a lot. We want to budget for 10 years of travel. Okay, how much do you want to budget? Oh, we think, $5,000 or $10,000 a year will be enough. Great, we'll put that in the plan. Okay, I know you're going to want that extra money at the beginning. You know what, Melissa, we have to do home improvement. We want to stay in our house. We're due for a new air conditioner. We're due for a new heater. We're going to need a new roof. Okay, let's plan for that. Then we identify the resources that you have. What kind of money do you have? Where do you have it at? Are you going to get a pension? How much Social Security going to be for you? How much do you have saved in your 401k, 403b, IRAs? What resources do we have? You have rental income? Okay, let's put that into place. Are you expecting an inheritance? I hope you are. Then we go say, okay, we have to look at what's your risk tolerance and how's that going to affect your investment strategy? Once we know your risk tolerance, we can probably project a decent investment rate of return for you, right? More aggressive strategies give you a higher rate of return in the long run, but you might not be comfortable with that level of risk, right? More conservative strategies, you take less risk, you get a little bit less of return, but that's actually okay, especially considering that sequence of returns pattern we just saw, right? Or if we take more risk and we watch a huge downfall in our investment strategy at the beginning of retirement, that can be really harmful for us in the long run. And then we look at results. And so this is where, financial planning, again, I just am encouraging you to find somebody. It doesn't have to be necessarily ClearVista advisors. Work with your financial advisor, work with the resources that you have available through your retirement plan providers, but do some financial planning to figure out what's an appropriate amount that I can withdraw. And the thing about financial planning is it changes over time, right? I had a client get sick, so we decided to claim Social Security sooner. We were going to wait to take it until she was age 70, but we decided to claim it sooner. We have market downturns happen, right? Client wants to buy a new vehicle, and we say, you know what, your portfolio is down right now. Can we wait to buy that new vehicle for another year or 2 years till the market recovers? And then we also have this thing. It's called the "What are you afraid of?" Melissa, how is inflation going to affect my retirement? All right, let's run some numbers down here. Inflation. Melissa, what if my spouse dies sooner than I expected? Okay, let's run the situation. Melissa, what if healthcare costs more than I expected? All right, let's run the scenario, right? So we can run all these things. Our goal is just to help alleviate the unknowns for you and how they're going to impact your overall financial plan, right? So, all right, so that's kind of my thoughts on creating an income for you in retirement with IRAs, using financial planning, sequence of returns. So how much can I withdraw? It depends on your financial plan strategy. It depends on your goals. It depends on how much you have saved. We start with the 4% withdrawal rule, but I would really, really dare say that the financial planning tools that are available through financial advisors nowadays are going to help you do a lot better prediction of how much you can withdraw for you than just the standard 4% withdrawal rule. Okay. All right. You guys are quiet out there. All right. Other tips and tricks. So other tips and tricks. One thing I like to do or take in consideration as an advisor, we usually have paid Uncle Sam. I don't mind paying Uncle Sam my due share in taxes. Okay. We as Americans have a lot of things to be thankful for. However, I don't want to pay extra taxes if I don't have to. Okay. So tax minimization strategies. So there are really 3 types of account, actually 4. That there's, so we have taxable accounts. That's going to just be like a joint account. Let's say you wanted to put some money in the stock market. You opened up a joint account or a single account, an investment account at Fidelity. Any dividends, any interest are going to get taxed. And then also you have capital gains taxes that you're going to pay on them. So taxable accounts are least tax efficient type of account. Okay. Then we have our IRAs or our 401ks. Those are what we call tax deferred accounts. So when I put money in my IRA or when I put money into my 401k, I never pay taxes on that money. So while it was invested, it grew on a tax deferred basis. And when I take the money out, that's when I'm going to owe taxes on it. Then we have Roth IRAs. Roth IRAs, I prepaid my taxes. So before my money went into that Roth 401k, Roth 403b, or Roth IRA, I prepaid my taxes. Once the money's in there, it grows tax-free for me for the rest of my life until I take. So I love Roth IRAs, right? Prepay your taxes and let it grow tax-free. And then the last type of account, which we're not going to talk too much about, but they're actually my favorite, are house savings accounts. House savings accounts are never taxed. If you were to take a guess on how much you were going to spend on healthcare over retirement, how much do you think it would be? We're seeing couples usually spend anywhere between $250,000 to, on the high end, $500,000 over the course of retirement for their healthcare. If I can get that money into my HSA, if you're on a high deductible healthcare plan, and I can get that money invested, that money is never taxed. And I love that. But asset location really just comes down to, we want our most tax inefficient investments to go into our Roth IRA. So think of aggressive, high growth investments. I want those investments in my Roth IRA so that they can grow tax-free for as long as possible, right? I want my more tax efficient investments to be in my taxable account if I have one. And then our IRAs are kind of in the middle, and it doesn't quite matter as much what goes into an IRA because they're growing out there tax deferred for you. But your tax inefficient investments, aggressive investments, usually we want to see those in our Roth IRAs. Okay.
So I have a couple of questions and points of clarity here.
Yep.
They're coming through. So one of our attendees would like to have some clarity about when you talk about withdrawals, is that interest or principal on their investments?
Yeah. Typically when we talk withdrawals, we're just talking about the amount of money you want to take out of your account overall. So usually it's a bit of, so for investors that are like, oh, I never want to touch my principal. So let's talk about principal. I have $1 million in my account that I invested. That's my principal. I never want to tap into that $1 million. Well, when the market goes down, sometimes we're going to still have to take withdrawals out. We still need money to live on, right? So sometimes you do have to tap into our principal. Other times our dividends and interest and our gains are going to be enough for our withdrawals. So actually in financial planning, we just kind of smooth out the withdrawals overall. It doesn't really matter for us as much as if it comes from dividends or interest or from your principal. We just want to look at how much you can take out overall from your strategy and not outlive your money. So
Great. And another question about, you might not be able to speak with everyone, but maybe you have some industry standards on the amount that financial planners are currently charging or typically charging per year for total management.
Yep. I'm going to use that $1 million mark again too, or I'll just, so like I said, on average, the value that an advisor adds depends on the study that you look at, but Vanguard says the average advisor adds about 3% in value. That's the Vanguard Advisor Alpha study. Morningstar has a study called Alpha, Beta, and now Gamma. And Morningstar says the average advisor adds about 1.5%-ish in value. And that's not taking into account some of these tax minimization strategies that we're talking about. But usually around $1 million, I see an industry average of about 1%. It can be very variable, and it depends on the amount of advice. If someone's just taking care of investment management for you and they're not doing financial planning, well, maybe they charge less, right? If someone's doing financial planning and investment management for you, maybe they charge a little bit more. So it just depends really. That's where I say, on the cons, just make sure that you're aware of the fees that the advisor is charging all in. Your investment expense, and then the advisory fee if you're working with IRAs. And if you're looking for your 401k or your 403b, you have your investment expense, your record keeping expense, and then the advisory fee as well. So
Great, thank you.
Financial planners, if they're looking to do plans, I see just a one-time fee for a financial plan, anywhere being from like $2,000 to $10,000, depending on the sophistication of the plan. So okay, so one of the individuals on the call asked about, or on today's webinar, asked about RMDs. And the last week of December, the government passed what's called the Secure 2.0 law into place at the final hour, right in the last week of December. And so they're raising a required minimum distribution. Is the government, you didn't pay taxes yet on the money in your IRA or in your 401k. All right. We're not talking Roth, because Roth, you already prepaid your taxes. But the government says, hey, we've let this grow long enough. We want you to start taking out some withdrawals. You can go online. You can look up like a RMD calculator. FINRA, which is a financial services regulator, has one. The SEC has RMD calculator. Fidelity, Schwab, they all have RMD calculators. You put in your date of birth, you put in your account value, and it will give you a projection of how much you're going to have to start taking out each year. So they say, you know what, you have to start taking money out of your IRA, your individual retirement account, and pay taxes on it. Now, that does not necessarily mean you need to spend it. Okay. I have clients that take money out of their IRA and then they put it into that taxable investment account and they keep the money growing and invested for them. But usually for most of my clients, the amount they have to take out in their required minimum distribution they would have been taking out anyways because they need that money to live off of. Most people need to do it. But with the law change, it used to be 70 and a half that you had to start taking your money out. And then a few years ago, they changed it to age 72. And then as of this year, it's in the year that you turn 73, that you need to start taking out your required minimum distribution from either your 401k, 403b, or IRAs. Unless, look, I don't make the rules, okay? They're complicated. I don't make them. I just try to follow all of them. If you're still working and you don't have to take it out of your employer-sponsored retirement plan if you're still working. You're 75 years old and you're still working for ABC company, you don't have to take it out of your ABC 401k yet until you retire. Okay. If you have an IRA, you still have to take it out of there, but you don't have to take it out of the 401k that's sponsored by that employer until you retire. Okay. So when we talk about IRA rollovers, if you're not retired yet, and that might be one of the reasons why you don't want to move some of your money to an IRA, right? Because if you're going to work past your required minimum distribution age, then you would have to start taking out RMDs when you didn't need to. Okay. They're also moving this to age 75 in year 2033. So that's a ways out there, but it's already in the law. Okay. It used to be you would have to take an RMD from your Roth 401k money or your Roth 403b money, but they eliminated that starting in year 2024. So that used to be an advantage as to one of the reasons why you'd want to move your 401k over to a Roth IRA if you had Roth money, but they're eliminating that. So you don't need to take an RMD from any Roth money that's inside your 401k or 403b. And then it used to be if you didn't take your required minimum distribution, the IRS assessed a 50% penalty for the amount you were supposed to take out. And they've reduced that to 25%. Still pretty severe. So we need to make sure you're doing that when the time comes. So one of the ways to—
We have another question here before you get into the next section. Question is, how do I flag that the withdrawal is my RMD? Can I take it out now for this year?
Yeah, so let's say your RMD was $5,000, but you're already going to need to take 10,000 out anyway. Then you're going to meet it right throughout the year. A lot of people when they retire, what will happen is we just start monthly distributions from either their 401k, their 403b, or their IRAs, right? So I know I'm going to get $3,000 from Social Security or $2,000 a year from a month from Social Security. I need another $2,000 a month to live off of to get to my $4,000 that I need. And so we'll set it up so that your 401k or 403b just sends that $2,000 to you every single month, right? 2,000 times 12, that's a $24,000 distribution. As long as your RMD was less than $24,000, you will have satisfied that requirement throughout the course of the year. However, if you're like, you know what, Melissa, I didn't really need that money, so I just want to get it taken care of, you can do it at any point in time during the year. A safeguard I have set up for my clients is I have an automatic payment set up on their account by November 15th. So if they haven't taken it by November 15th, it either goes straight to their bank account or it goes straight to their other investment account. So we know it's taken care of. It's automated for them. If they've satisfied it by November 15th, no problem. But if they haven't, we're doing it, right? One thing to think about though is you don't need the money, with accounts being down right now and the market being down and investments being down. We have to think, do I want to leave that money in there in case the market does turn around by year end and let that money kind of recover before I take that distribution? Or do I just want to take care of it now, right? Something for consideration. One thing that you can do starting at age 70 and a half, but it does satisfy your required minimum distribution too, is qualified charitable distributions. So QCDs. If you are already maybe, West Michigan community, maybe you're tithing to your church on a regular basis, right? Or you have organizations like Grand Valley you are giving to on a regular basis, okay? You can gift directly out of your IRA, and it will go straight to that nonprofit, and that money will never be taxed, and it will help to satisfy your required minimum distribution. Okay, so in this scenario, Phil, he has a $15,000 required minimum distribution. He makes a $10,000 qualified charitable gift. So this is a check that is cut directly out of your 401k, directly out of your IRA. It's made payable to Grand Valley State University. All right. Susan didn't ask for this plug, but or your church or your other nonprofit that you are supporting. It's made payable directly to them, and then you send it directly to that. We code it as a qualified charitable distribution. You're going to put it on your tax return. And so Phil has now satisfied $10,000 of his $15,000 RMD. He would still have to take the other $5,000 out and have it be taxable, but it's a way for him to reduce his taxes, right? So if giving is already a part of your budget, what a great way to give and not be taxed on that money. Okay.
Melissa, speaking of taxes, I have a question about the best way to pay city, state, federal taxes on RMD.
Yeah, good question. So when you sign up for your 401k and 403b, that you will determine what kind of withholding you want. Now, I don't know if that Secure Act changed withholding. It used to be on a 401k, 403b, and I think it's still the case, but I need to double check this. Again, it's a new law that just passed the end of December. 401ks required them to withhold 20% for federal taxes and then 4.25% for state. Most of you are going to be in a 12% tax bracket in retirement. That's the most common tax bracket. So you're like, why did you withhold 20% when I only needed to have 12% withheld? You'll get that back as a refund. More money got taken out of your account than you probably wanted, but you'll get it back as a refund when you file your taxes. On IRA distributions, the nice thing about IRAs is you get to choose. You get to choose when you want to, or how much you want to have withheld. So if you're in the 12% tax bracket, you can have 12% withheld for federal. Michigan state tax is 4.25%. So you're going to have 4.25% held for Michigan state tax. And then we don't do any city. You just got to play catch up with them later. So it's just automatically done. We say, oh, you want a check for $5,000? Great. We have to take, hypothetically $7,000 out of your account to cover your taxes, and it's done for you automatically. Social Security, there's an additional form you fill out and you return to Social Security and then withhold taxes, federal taxes on your Social Security distributions. So it's much like your employer income. You get your W-2, it shows how much you made and then how much was withheld for taxes. With retirement plan distributions, you get a document called the 1099-R. It shows how much you took out and it shows how much we withheld for taxes. So
good. And I know we're coming up close on time, but there was a question to see if you could flip back to the website that was showing how much RMDs are. Yeah,
I just use Google RMD distributions because it's so common. So I do RMD calculator, and you're going to get Fidelities, you're going to get Charles Schwab's, you're going to get Vanguard's. It's a very popular calculator out there.
Right.
So
we can put a resource in a follow-up email for you all as well. Thank you.
I have two more tricks for you real quick before we're done with today. One thing is to consider is sometimes in retirement, you're in a little bit lower tax bracket than you would be in later in retirement, or as you need more money out later in retirement. Also, the current tax brackets that we're under for 2023, these are set to sunset after 2025. So the current tax code, if Congress doesn't pass anything, and Lord knows what will happen, these current rates will go back to the taxes that we had back in 2017, okay, for the income bracket. So most of us are in lower tax brackets than we were back in 2017, most of us. And so it can make sense to convert some money from your IRA into a Roth IRA and pay taxes on that money now while you're in a lower tax bracket, and then let that money grow in your Roth IRA tax-free. Also, if you're never going to use your Roth IRA, those that inherit your Roth IRA are going to inherit that Roth IRA tax-free. So sometimes our children are in higher tax brackets than we are. So it's a way for us to take care of taxes before they get it. And last but not least is a concept called deduction clumping. So right now, standardized deductions are pretty high. So if you were giving money previously, you might have been doing that as an itemized deduction on your taxes, but now you don't get to take that as an itemized deduction. So you're really not getting any tax credit for that giving that you're doing. This isn't qualified charitable distributions. It's just your normal giving, right? For couples, unless you have deductions higher than almost $28,000, right? You're not really getting credit for, you're not getting any tax deductions for that giving you're doing. So another financial planning strategy we're using for those in retirement is called deduction clumping, meaning maybe I do more giving in 1 year, and I lump all these deductions together, right? So maybe I give all my giving in 1 year for the giving I'm going to do in 2 years. So let me explain that a little bit more. So if I know I like to give, and I usually give about $30,000 over 2 years. If I gave $15,000 and $15,000 over 2 years, 2023 and 2024, I wouldn't get any tax deduction for that because I'm filing jointly and it's underneath my standardized deduction of $27,000. But if I do all my giving in 2023 and I take $30,000 and give it now and clump those together and tell whoever I'm giving to, hey, this is your donation for this year and next year. Okay. Now I get a tax deduction. Okay. So just some strategies I'm throwing out there that you can implement to help save some taxes. Lastly, just to finish up, because we are at our limit today, we made it through a ton of content, a ton of ideas, is that not all advisors are the same. I encourage people to look for 3 things when they're looking to vet a financial advisor to work with. What is your experience? How long have you been doing this for? What is your expertise? So advisors have niches that they work with. One of my niches is that I work with a lot of retirees. So I stay on top of Social Security, RMDs, qualified charitable distributions, Medicare, and then what's your education? You know, hopefully they were a Laker. Do you have a fiduciary standard of care? So what it means to be a fiduciary is a standard out there that says any recommendations I make to you have to be in your interest right now, in your best interest, and I have an ongoing responsibility to make sure they continue to be in your best interest. Okay. Back in the day, we had stockbrokers, right? That's kind of where the industry started out with. I would call Susan up. Hey, Susan, you should buy 100 shares of Apple today. Susan would buy 100 shares of Apple. I would make a commission on it. I no longer had any obligation to make sure that Susan should still be owning Apple. The reason I'd want her to sell her Apple stock is because I'll make another commission, right? The more she trades her account, the more commissions I earn. And that's kind of, in my opinion, a more of an old standard. New standard is a fiduciary standard of care where any recommendations I make to you have to be in your best interest. And then just understand the fees. So we talked a little bit about that previously. So with that, I just really appreciate your time today. I'm more than happy to sit down. We do that first consult, no cost. But otherwise, I hope I just gave you some things to think about when you're talking to your own personal financial advisor, or if you're trying to do this on your own, you have some advice and some concepts and some tips, education around what to look for. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Melissa, so much for sharing your expertise. One of the 3 E's with us today and ongoing and being part of this great Retire Well series. I hope you all are continuing to learn things. We will send a follow-up message to you, which will include a link to this webinar and some helpful resources that were shared today. So keep a lookout for that. And we appreciate you joining us today and hope to see you next Thursday. Have a great day.
Thank you.